this part, we will deal with the arrival to our Mediterranean cruise. You remember, our ship starts in the harbor of Barcelona, and since we live in Cologne, first we have to get to Barcelona. So now we will focus on the arrival, and the plan is the following. We start in Cologne, take a train to Frankfurt, and there we take an airplane to Barcelona. The first thing I did was to set the calculation of time in the project settings here to relative time. This is important because, as I mentioned in the former lesson, we will use our Vasco da Gama project not directly, but we will process it together with our own video material in a final video project made for our holiday. That means, although the arrival to Barcelona is not the most important part of our journey, we have to tell something about the arrival, and with the time calculation set to relative time, it is now very easy for us to define the time needed from Cologne to Barcelona to give all the information about the arrival part. We start at the beginning of our route in Cologne, and here the time setting, the use arrival time, is set to off. This is normal because it's the starting point of the route, and I've set a pause time of 1 second. So we have 1 second later on in our video editing program to realize a fade in or something like that. As head object, I have selected a 3D object, and I've selected this train here, and I've set the object size to 50%. Additionally, in the route section, I have defined the acceleration distance to 100% so that our train starts smoothly, slowly to move. And now let's move on to the next point in Frankfurt. Here the use arrival time is set to on, and the arrival time is set to 10 seconds. That means our train needs 10 seconds to get from Cologne to Frankfurt. There is no pause time, and here the acceleration distance and the brake distance are set to 100% too, so the train stops smoothly and our plane starts slowly. In the object sections, we change the head object at this stopover point. As the new head object, I have selected an Airbus from the Lufthansa Corporation, and since here we changed the object, I've selected here a fade, a smooth fade in and a fade out with a duration of 12 frames, more or less half a second. So the train needs half a second to fade out and the airplane half a second to fade in, and that is the reason why I don't have defined any pause time, because the fade in and the fade out already some 1 second. On our way from Frankfurt to Barcelona, I've introduced another stopover point, and this point has only one purpose: to get our airplane up in the air. As you can see here, we are still in Frankfurt, and I go to the object section. If we have a look at the position, the altitude of our object, of our plane, is 0%. Our airplane is still on the ground. And in Barcelona, this is true too, of course, because here our plane starts from the ground and it lands on the airport on the ground. But in the middle, during the flight, we would like to see it up in the air. So I've introduced this additional point, and at this point I've raised the altitude to 10%. To do this, here in the head object section, you have to select Change Adjustments. Change Adjustments means that the object stays the same, but we can change many parameters as the altitude, and the second parameter I have changed here is the size of the object. The normal object size I've set to 50%, as with the train. The plane too stays at 50%. with the exception at this stop over point. Here I raise it to 70%, so when the plane gets up in the air, it gets a little bit bigger, and that gives us a little bit more 3D effect. So let's have a look how the animation looks until this point. I will jump back to the starting point of the route, and first we will visit very shortly the camera section. Now the preview images will be created every time, and here you can see the camera control is set to automatic, camera points at every point, and the profile is side glance. So let's go back to route, and now in the preview section, and I will start the animation. Here is our train in Cologne, moving on to Frankfurt. Here we switch to the airplane. Here you can see the effect of the sides of the airplane, and now we land at Barcelona. And this is a very important effect. Here in Barcelona I show this green picture. Obviously we could have placed here a picture of Barcelona, of the city, of the harbor, or something else, but I wanted this green rectangle because this gives us the opportunity later on in our video editing program to use a chroma key effect and substitute the green rectangle here with our own filmed video material. This is a very nice effect. For this reason I used the rather ugly green color, because this color doesn't appear in any other part of our video animation. And now I will show you how I have constructed the appearance of this green box. So we leave the preview, and now I will zoom in here a little bit to Barcelona. Here is our airplane, and now I will zoom in further until the airplane disappears. And here you can see this is the airport. At this point our plane touches the ground, and as you can see with the route line here on the right is the next point, the harbor of Barcelona. But first I will explain you why I have set here 4 points in line. The reason for the additional stopover points here is very simple. We cannot do all the actions needed at one point, and so I have set several points in line very close together, so that viewed from a distance you won't see that there are 4 separate points. And now let's have a look at the settings, one point after another. The first one here is the arrival point of our airplane. So in the route settings the arrival time is on, and the time is set to 10 seconds. This is the time our airplane needs from Frankfurt to Barcelona. At the stopover point in the middle of the flight, where we raise the airplane up in the air, the arrival time is set to off, so we don't affect the time at that point. And here we do more or less the same. We set the arrival time to 10 seconds, and in the object sections we have selected change adjustments to, because here we reduce again the size of the object of the airplane to 50%, and we lower the altitude again to 0%, so our plane gets back to its normal size and lands on the ground. Now we jump to the next point, and here we have an arrival time of 12 frames, so half a second to go from here to there. And here in the object section we switch the head object off. This is the only action, the only purpose of this stopover point, to switch the head object off so that the airplane disappears. And there is no pause time, just the arrival time of 12 frames, so we will almost instantly get to this point. And here at the next point you can see basically all the same, 12 frames for the arrival, and here we switch the object. And now as head object, I have selected an image object, and I've selected this picture, green box full HD TIFF, and this is a full HD sized picture. So it will have 1920 pixels by 1080, and the color settings are 255 for green and 0 for the other two colors, red and blue. The size is set to 55%, and the altitude is raised to 16% because otherwise our picture would be on the ground and there will be any other objects like head objects and so on above the picture. So to get the picture in front, I've raised the altitude a bit, and there is a fade in effect set to 1 second, and the effect is scale. So our picture appears from very small, go to its 55% size. And on the fourth point of our construction here, I've set in the root section the pause time of 5 seconds. This gives us 5 seconds time later on in our video editing project to realize whatever effect we would like. And now I'm sure you are asking, why don't you define the 5-second pause time directly at the third point when our picture appears, and then we can pause for 5 seconds, and so we don't need the fourth point? The reason is the execution time of Vasco da Gama. The pause time is executed before the fade in occurs. That means if we defined the pause time at this point, we won't see for 5 seconds any object, and after the 5 seconds the image will fade in. And for this reason I fade in at this point and then go to the next point, and here I define the pause time for 5 seconds, so our image will be seen during this time. There is no fade out effect. This isn't needed. Later on we will process this animation in a video editing program. And from here we go to the next point here in the harbor, and here we switch the head object again. Here we will select a 3D object, and I've selected here the AIDA Aura from the AIDA cruise lines, so that we will get some nice images during our journey through the Mediterranean Sea. But first let's go back to our starting point. So let's zoom out a little bit, and I would like to jump back to our starting point in Cologne, and to make our animation a little bit more dramatic, I would like to add an effect in front of our animation before our train starts to move. I would like to see an approach from outer space, zooming in directly to the starting point of our route. And to realize this, which is pretty easy, I would like here to zoom in a little bit more until our head object disappears. So now we can see the starting point of our route here in the middle of the River Rhine. It doesn't matter because we don't zoom in as closely as now. So if we like to do something before this point, we would have to add another point before the starting point, but that isn't possible. So what we do is really we add another point after, just here. We will convert it into a stopover point, and this will be the real starting point for our train, and this point will be the starting point of the animation. So at the real starting point I will set the brake distance and the acceleration distance to off. We will leave the pause time of 1 second, and 2, we will leave the selection of the 3D object. Now I will jump to the next point. Here we set the pause time 2 to 1 second. This is now the pause time before the train starts to move, and I will set the acceleration and the brake distance to 100%. The object stays current, nothing changed, and now basically we have finished, but at this point we have to set the arrival time. I will switch it to on, and I will set an arrival time of 4 seconds. These 4 seconds are the time the approach from outer space will take. So this will have a duration of 4 seconds. And now we are finished with these settings here, and we can go to the camera section, because the real work is done in the camera section. Now remember, we are by the moment in automatic camera mode, and we have to switch to manually camera mode, because here we can't make any changes. Now I will switch to manually. Now all the preview images will be recreated using the profile side glance, just as we had it in automatic mode. We are seeing now exactly the same, but now they are manually camera points and we can edit them. So here we have the starting point at time 0 and the second point here at 5 seconds. 5 seconds means 4 seconds to go from the first point to the second, plus the additional 1 second waiting time, pause time. That means the times shown here below these small preview images are the time of the last frame of this camera point. So just the frame before the camera leaves this point. Now I will go here to the first, and we will switch our view to looking straight down on the Earth. I will do it with this button here. And now we will zoom out until we see the whole globe, like this. And that's all. I will save these camera settings for this point. Vasco da Gama now recreates the images. And now we can see here in the small preview that we start from here and go to there. So let's have a look at the preview. And I will start it. And now our train starts to move. And this is exactly the effect that we have seen many times on television. So this looks very nice. And you can see with a few settings you can create very dramatic effects. Now, if you would like to change the duration of this approach from outer space, this zoom in effect, and you, for example, set the arrival time here from 4 to 6 seconds to make the approach 2 seconds longer. And we go now back to the camera section. You will see, although the preview images will be created, here nothing has changed, because here we should now see 7 seconds. 6 seconds from the first to the second point, plus the additional 1 second pause time. But nothing has changed, and that's pretty normal because we are at manually mode. In manually mode, these camera points don't adjust. So we have to do it manually. And that is the reason why I mentioned in the first lesson that we will define the route completely, and when everything is in place and all the timings are correct, then we will switch from automatic to manually camera mode and adjust all the views at all the camera points, because if we change something in the timing later on, we have to recreate the camera points. So in this case it is very easy, because here later on we haven't made anything specially, only in the first camera point. So here it is no problem to switch to automatic, wait for the recreation, and then go back to manually. and we have to adjust the camera view of the first point again. But now we see here our correct 7 seconds. So now we have to go back, upright position, zooming out, and saving. So this is the problem with the difference between automatic and manually camera mode, and that's all we have to keep in mind. Therefore, we will treat those camera settings in the last part of this multi-part tutorial.